So what I think is interesting here is that most of the questions, well, they all began with why, not how, but why, which I think is a crucial point. And the second point is that they almost all focused on students. The only one that didn't was the one at the end, which is, why is CPD, continuing professional development, seen as a burden? Which I think is a really interesting question. So I'm not going to tell you too much more about those, but suffice to say that the teachers and teacher trainers, teacher educators who worked on those puzzles used their normal pedagogic practice to investigate. So, for example, Archa and Dolgu, they looked at, why do we fail to integrate student opinions in shaping up course content, program, or curricula or syllabi? So this was also something that Bisa writes about, looking at how the curriculum is designed and where are the student voices. So he actually used the kinds of meetings that he was doing, that they all used, meetings that they would normally be having, but with this additional set of lenses, exploratory practice lenses, to kind of reflect on, to observe, to notice, and indeed to ask questions about that. Let me go on to the next one. I'm conscious of the time. Perhaps to give you a more detailed idea, I'll give you a quick vignette, so from my own story of exploratory practice in EAP. So in about 1999, I started at the Language Centre, as I was saying, and I was thinking, well, this exploratory practice thing, it sounds really interesting, but at the time, nobody was doing it in the UK in EAP. They were doing it in different settings. They were doing it in, Asia Slimani-Rolls was doing great work with teaching French, for example, but not as far as I knew in EAP in the UK. So I thought, well, okay, I'm going to try and find out. So I actually was working with teacher development anyway. That was part of my remit. Worked with colleagues and teachers and learners in EAP. And in order to do so, we utilized our normal EAP practices. So, for example, if I was teaching a skills development class, for example, students listening to lectures and taking notes, or students conducting their own research projects and delivering oral presentations, we use those normal activities as tools to investigate whatever it was that puzzled us. So eventually, my entire PhD could be boiled down to that question. Why don't we do EP and EAP? Obviously, it was a bit more complicated than that. But as we did this, two things became apparent. Firstly, individuals discovered that they were not alone in their puzzled arena. One of the things that I've noticed is that when you ask people what puzzles you, they often focus on a problem, and they often think that they are the only person who is grappling with that issue. So one of the things about exploratory practice is working together and finding out, oh, there's other people are interested in this as well. So for example, in the article from Language Teaching Research, the teacher called Bella was really surprised to find that she was interested in spelling, but other colleagues were also interested in spelling, and they ended up working together on a teacher development workshop to discuss different ways of teaching English spelling in academic settings. The second thing that happened was we developed a heightened respect for our colleagues, whether that was teachers or learners, and what we could learn from each other. So again, drawing on Bella's situation, what she said was this question about spelling. she shared it with her students, and she found, well, actually, I discovered it's not as easy as you think. And this gave her, I think, as she was listening to the students and the struggles that they had and the theories that they had about why English spelling was like this and why was it so difficult, it heightened her respect for those students. Likewise, in my situation as the teacher development person, I gained a huge respect for my colleagues, for all of the different things that they were grappling with, how they managed it, and what were they doing to develop their understandings of the field and of pedagogy as they were continuing with their work. So the thing that I really want to emphasize at this point is that I've talked about puzzles, and I would see puzzles as sort of embryonic research questions, if you like. If the puzzle is relevant to EAP practice, then practitioners made time to investigate. This question of not having enough time just sort of kind of disappeared because they were actually interested and they felt it was useful and relevant to their work. What was important was avoiding the lure of problems and problem solving. You know, the question about spelling, for example, you might easily say, oh, well, you just teach them this is how you spell in English, and we do lots of tests and, you know, problem solved. But actually, what Bella was saying is it's not how to do it that's the question. It's why is it a problem? Why is it difficult? That's my question. So as the practitioners, various practitioners found out that other people shared their puzzles, the momentum grew. So certainly in my own situation, I thought at the beginning I was the only one who was interested in exploratory practice. A colleague of mine, Jane, way back in what would have been about 2006, I think, she also shared my interest, and we kind of sparked off each other, growing in momentum, growing in interest. We found the questions that we asked and the questions that the students asked really endlessly fascinating. So while they or we were investigating, sharing, disseminating, they reported enhanced enjoyment, what I would call quality of life, of their practice. So moving from being quite sort of a little bit bored, a little bit stale, I've been doing this for many, many years, they gained this sort of excitement. So again, another teacher from the article in System, who I've called John, he talked about, you know, he was close to retirement age. I think he retired the year after, or that we did this work. But he said he was amazed because, first of all, he shared the question with his students. His question was, why do students come not ready to learn? And then he invited them to question themselves. And he did it as a sort of a pyramid discussion. So, you know, pairs to groups of 4 to groups of 8 and so on. And he said, amazingly, they all ended up with the same question. They all wanted to know about vocabulary. Why is vocabulary, learning vocabulary, academic vocabulary, so very difficult? And they went on to investigate that themselves. One of the things that he became very excited by was the fact that he memorably told them at one point, okay, it's lunchtime, time to stop. I'm going to close up the classroom now. And he said, they didn't listen to me. They didn't come. They were so interested in what they were doing. They didn't actually want to stop. And they carried on through their lunch hour. He said, okay, here's the key. You can lock up. So being curious about the ambiguities and the multiple perspectives in English for academic purposes settings fed those little flames of interest. And I'm just going back again to 2002 because I love these questions that my colleagues came up with. This again was from teacher development element, end of my work. So why do lessons that I think are going to be amazing always seem to fall flat, and vice versa? Why do my students instantly forget what has been taught despite recycling and so on and so on? Why is it so difficult for students to agree on a common learning objective? Stella might be interested in this. Why might teacher talk be useful to students? Why do I feel I should give feedback after each classroom activity? Why do students pick up on what the teacher sees as irrelevant details? And that's again a very interesting one about multiple perspectives. And one of my favorite ones, why, when I think I've got a great lesson, is it pants? In other words, is it rubbish? And vice versa. It's basically a reframing of that same first question. So all of those, I think, can spark off questions in you. And in a minute, I'm going to ask you to type in the chat. But from 2002, I'm going to jump forward to puzzles from my colleagues in 2020. So I haven't stopped. I'm still going. So some of the questions that colleagues have asked are questions like this. Why do I leave planning to the last minute? Why do I love teaching but hate marking? Why don't I like online teaching? And interestingly, I just assumed that this was the same for everybody. I thought, oh, we all don't like online teaching. But actually, as a result of this question, one other teacher, a colleague of mine, turned around and said, well, actually, I like online teaching. This has been a revelation to me. I actually prefer it to face-to-face. A common question that many, many people asked in 2020, why don't my students switch on their cameras? And I would add to that, why does it annoy me that they don't switch on their cameras? And finally, why do I miss classroom face-to-face teaching? So once again, your turn in the chat. Could you write what puzzles you, and could you try to start with a why question? I could spend hours just looking at the puzzles. And in fact, I mean, that's been a lifetime's work for me. The last 20 years, I've been so interested in it. So I'd really like to kind of invite you to hold on to those questions. And I hope we can save this chat actually so that we can go back to these puzzles later. Because I think these are interesting starting points for research, whether it's scholarship, whether it's research, whether it's practitioner research. I think that doesn't really matter. I think what's interesting is these are questions which are relevant to our practice as EAP practitioners. They are questions which I think spark off excitement and interest.